The next speaker, Colm Regan, is the man who wrote the textbook. I was just absolutely delighted when Katrina announced that a Highland One World meeting that Colm was going to come and talk at this conference today, because this is a man of great experience and insight into the world of global citizenship and learning for sustainability. He's come all the way from Malta, hence the short sleeves, and we're delighted to have him here. One of these small world things that happens in social media. About a week after Katrina announced that Colm was going to be the speaker, somebody came up on a Twitter feed that I follow in a totally different capacity, and it was a link to something that Colm had written about the Rugby World Cup last summer. Now, Rugby World Cup will be remembered in Scotland for an outrageous referee that meant that we were put out at the quarter-final stage when we were obviously going to go on and win the World Cup. But you might also remember, even if you weren't really interested in rugby at all, that the Rugby World Cup coverage was linked to an opportunity to put money towards the fight against world hunger. And you were asked to donate £5. And I was one of the people who responded to that and completely jammed up the system. It became very difficult to donate your £5 because so many people were responding to it. And yet, while I was doing it, I was kind of troubled by it. I thought there's something not quite right about this. That this huge multi-million-pound tournament going on with everything that's associated with it, and with ticket prices that are in excess of £100 in some cases, and we're being asked to give £5 to such as world hunger. And yet there was something more than that, that there's something here that is making people feel that this is exactly the right thing to do, this is the way we should be doing it. I didn't articulate it in any way, I couldn't actually work out exactly what it was that was bothering me. And then this link came through. And this was Colm talking about it. And it's worth, I presume it'll be available on a blog somewhere to go and look at it. I'll just quote from the end of it, because in a few words Colm articulated what I felt in a way that I wasn't able to. Individual donations of cash, no matter how effectively used, will never eradicate hunger, as they fail to address its systemic causes: unjust trade, poverty, land tenure, discrimination against women, etc., etc. The Rugby World Cup is to be congratulated for highlighting the issue, but the response it offers falls well below what is required. It needs to highlight the systemic and political nature of the issue and encourage its viewers to do likewise. And then it finishes, the right to food is not about charity, it's about ensuring that all people have the capacity to feed themselves with dignity. And I thought, wow, that's it. That's what I was thinking. And I just couldn't find the words. So on the basis of that blog alone, far beyond anything else that Colm has ever written and said, you can be absolutely confident that the next half hour or 40 minutes, and if he wants to take longer, I'm sure he'll be allowed to take longer, you will be informed, you will be inspired, but you might also be challenged. Please welcome Colm Regan.
Thanks, Colm. Be very careful what you write in blogs. I don't have a Facebook account and I don't have a Twitter account, but they keep coming and biting me in the ass. So, an example, a lucky one. Good morning everyone, and my sincere thanks to the troops from Highland. It's a great opportunity to come, my first time in Inverness. Very nice, beautiful campus, really posh. Well done to everybody for delivering this, great. But it's great to get an opportunity to come back to Scotland. I've worked in Scotland quite a lot of good friends, a lot of good contacts, colleagues, etc. in Scotland, so it's always good to come back. Colm has given me my first reference point, 2031, kids leaving school, under the model of poverty elimination suggested by the Sustainable Development Goals, our new shiny model. It'll take until 2116 to eliminate poverty. Over 100 years under the current model planned in this new shiny supermodel, the SDGs, to eliminate basic poverty. If we continue to use economic growth as it's currently practiced, as a model for trickle down to the poor, it'll take 100 years, and even after 100 years, we still won't have eliminated chronic poverty. Now, I put it to you, that is absolutely unacceptable. And the challenge to teachers and educators is, in the context of those people that Colm referred to, becoming prepared to exit from the school system in 2031, what's our duty to them in relation to that? And what's our duty collectively to those who won't get there till 2116? And that's at the heart of what I'd like to briefly talk about. For me, education is at the epicenter of the 21st century. I'm reminded of the famous quote, "It's a race between education and barbarism." That sounds a bit dramatic, but the reality is, if you look at what's happening in Europe at the moment, you look at the Mediterranean, you look at the response to Syria, you look at the Middle East, barbarism is not a word that seems out of place. Shouldn't we be teaching about barbarism? If you look at the preamble to the Universal Declaration, forget the, if you ever want to teach human rights, forget about the Universal Declaration, go for the preamble. They use the word barbarism in the preamble. The words in the preamble are not what you kind of find in a nice woolly, let's dance around the tree and hold hands project. It's actually quite hard, because of course it came out of a very hard context of the Second World War. And those words that are in the preamble are even more relevant now than they were then. And we can see echoes. Certainly, I don't know about you, but if that company that was proposing that migrants wear red wristbands, and if the Danes get their way in terms of confiscation, we were discussing this last night, and I was saying to John that this is an issue I'm prepared to go to prison on. This is not something, if you read someone like a philosopher like Thomas Pogge, American-German, who begins his book on human rights and poverty, recommend Pogge, by the way, really good stuff. But Pogge says that when I grew up in Germany, I used to ask the question of my grandparents, how did you let this happen? I don't want my grandchildren, I have 3 grandchildren, I don't want my grandchildren asking me, how did I let this happen? And I think educators and teachers have a unique, wonderful opportunity to engage in those debates and to help prepare and tool up young people and adults in terms of engaging with these kind of debates, so that they don't overwhelm us, that we're capable of deconstructing them in order to reconstruct them. Because the danger with stuff like this is, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, like your man's going on this morning about this stuff, and I'm just overwhelmed. No, don't panic. Education, good education, allows us the space and the time and the opportunity to deconstruct those and to reconstruct them so that they become manageable. We can get our heads around them. So what I want to try and do this morning, very briefly, is to just talk about a little bit about how we might go around that. Now, I'm not going to have time to go through all the detail, so I've given Rachel some PowerPoints, and I'm happy to supply more, and they'll go up on the website. So if I don't get a chance to go far enough, grab them and use them. That's what they're for. That's what they're there for. And feel free to come back and ask for more. Colm mentioned the blog. It's on developmenteducation.ie, which is a website we run with a consortium of NGOs. And there's resources, there's blogs, there's whatever. And we've just made it tablet and phone friendly after a 7-month conversion program, and a lot of that material is there. So feel free to use that. I will not be able to adequately cover the ground this morning. So for me, teaching and learning, and unfortunately unlearning, because there's a lot we need to unlearn as well in order to relearn. So for me, teaching and learning has never been more important. It's never been more urgently needed, and it's never been more challenging. But in many ways, it's never been more rewarding. Because as an educator, and I consider myself to be an educational activist, I believe very, very strongly in education, not as preparation for engaging in the world, but as actual engaging with the world. It's a very powerful tool and opportunity, and a very rewarding one. And I think teachers and educators are uniquely placed to engage with these kinds of issues. But there are challenges. And one of the key challenges is going to be the abuse you get for trying to effectively engage with some of these issues. And I've been grappling with this for 35 years, so I'm fairly hardened at this stage to the process. But what I do know is that the rewards are massive. The number of students, the number of people who've stopped me and said, "You don't know who I am, but you taught me," or I was at a workshop, or whatever, and it happens all the time. And those students who will come out of school in 2031, think about their lives beyond 2031 and the capacity that you have for all the people they will interact with. Yeah, so it's a wonderful opportunity to engage with these debates. Also, by engaging with these debates, we're being good teachers, depending on how we engage with them. You have to make up your own mind about how you feel about those issues. I'm not going to solve climate change for you. I have my views, but for my views, there's another 5,463 million other ones. But what an opportunity to develop fundamental questions about values, about what does it mean to be a teacher in the world, what does it mean to be a person of goodwill in the world, what does it mean to be a vegetarian, vegan, feminist in the world, whatever particular suit you wear on any particular day. I want to summarise my argument because I will run out of time. And I would encourage people to jump in, please do. This is not a solo run, at least I hope not. But I want to summarise my argument. Any serious review of the world and of the role of citizenship would of necessity have to acknowledge any number of fundamental challenges. I've chosen the ones I want to emphasise. You might choose your own. But for me, one of the things I don't like about citizenship education at the moment is it's being reduced to an instrumentalist set of items that are receiving official approval. And I come from a not the government organisation. And we're used to saying non-governmental, and people hear non-governmental. I stop and I go, I'm from a not the government. And they go, why is he doing that? You get my drift? So I'm here to challenge, I'm here to question, I'm not here to supplement. One of the problems with the NGO movement is we've become too close to government. We need to recover and rediscover the roots that made us not the government organisation. We exist, our origins are because we wanted to do stuff that the government wasn't doing or didn't want to do or was opposed to. So I'm from the not the government movement. And I'm just saying that quite deliberately, looking for alternative perspectives, challenging what's being given to us on the SDGs. I support the SDGs, but I don't support them uncritically. That would be stupid. It's a package deal, and we're all supposed to now lurry in behind it and start, promoting it. No, whoa. Our first duty is to have a look at it. Deconstruct it a little bit. See if the maths add up, because if you look at the maths, they don't add up. Okay? So for me, education is fundamental to dealing with those challenges. The challenges of climate change. We're all activists on climate change. There's no non-activist on climate change. You're either an activist or an activist. Okay? So we have no choice on the climate change. You know all of that. We've been involved with the NGO in Ireland Concern in producing a little handbook on everyday activism. Trying to get away from the notion that teachers always say to me, oh, I agree with you, oh God, yeah, you're absolutely, should I join Amnesty? And I go, well, yeah, you should join, yeah, I think you should join Amnesty, it's a good, I'm a member, I think they do good work, we do good work, but that's not the issue, that's not the question. Everyday activism is the question. What are the sites of activity on a daily basis that I engage with that give me opportunities to make a choice? And of course, you've got one of the best choices of all as teachers. You know? So I always say to people, or to teachers particularly, should I join Amnesty? Yeah, but look at your job description. That's the much more interesting opportunity. And the notion that we have to go somewhere else to engage with these issues and become something different is a nonsense. We just look at where we are, look around us at what we do every day. You could have a look at inequality. Oxfam just published their Davos briefing on inequality. It's becoming so obscene, it's just breathtakingly obscene. But now, even that radical Trotskyist organization, the World Bank, is recognizing that it's actually now massively counterproductive in terms of what we're trying to do. It's damaging even our own model of development, economic development, as espoused by the bank. We could pick other challenges like the ongoing genuflection towards world hunger. All my life, I was 13 when I was vaguely aware of the first statement, no child shall go to bed hungry. I'm now 65 in June. No child will still go to bed hungry. 50 years later, with all our capacity, 800 million people, we know who they are. Go to the rapporteur on food security and he'll tell you exactly who they are. We know when they'll be hungry. We know why they're hungry. We know where they're hungry. Read the stuff from the Olivier de Schutter on world hunger. We know precisely. And yet, and we know why. And yet, our schools are still limping around with Lenten campaign boxes, non-uniform days, etc. I'm not necessarily against them, don't get me wrong, but is that it? Is that an adequate response? Absolutely not. For me, anyway. And then we can have a look at the question of women's rights. You know, we claim we've moved on from where we were. There is no country in the world that treats its women the same as its men. Not one. That's the title of a report from the Uruguay, blank, old age. It'll come back to me later. Based in Uruguay and Montevideo, they publish reports. They have one. No country in the world treats its women the same as its men. A breathtaking admission. Now, I have 2 daughters. I have no sons. So I'm a feminist. No, I'm sorry. I was corrected recently. I was told, men can't be feminists, but you can do feminism. So I'm doing feminism. But as a father of 2 daughters, I find it breathtaking that after all the struggle, all the work, all the talk, all the waffle, all the blah, 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 we still have no country that treats its women the same. And that includes the Scandinavians, by the way. I find these things, from a teaching perspective, from an educational perspective, getting under those issues raises very fundamental questions about the nature of society, the nature of... Can you keep on in the time?
Yeah.
Okay, well, you jump up or whatever. Okay? So for me, from an educational perspective, there's 3 things we need to do. Looking at issues like that. You pick your own issues. One of the PowerPoints I have for you is on inequality. You can look at the detail, you can look at the consequences. One is on the Earth Declaration. Now, as a teacher, if you want to get into climate change, sustainable development, all that stuff, the Earth Declaration is a great tool to look at and use. It's just a platform. You could use other ones, but it's actually very accessible, very usable. It comes in bite-sized chunks. You can look at the 8 different dimensions of the issue and use the declaration itself. People can write their own ones, they can do projects around it, they can do artwork, etc., etc., etc. I'm going to try and illustrate some of the work, because being in an NGO, we do a lot of work with schools, we do a lot of work. It's not by any means, I want to say this, that one of the bad habits that governments have developed is saying what are schools doing about it. Well, schools are doing a lot. In fact, probably too much, with lousy resources and blah, 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 blah. So schools are important, but schools are not the answer. It is not your responsibility to solve climate change. It's not our responsibility to resolve world hunger. But we have a role to play, and we need to be clear about what our appropriate role is, okay? But I want to illustrate some of the kind of work we do. We work a lot with 14, 13 to 15, 16-year-olds. You'll know why in terms of the issues. But for me, the work we do, Global Citizenship, is to be actively involved in right itself. So a lot of the work we do is about encouraging young people to develop skills, attitudes, values, perspectives, platforms, opportunities, but then to take it out into the community, not to keep it in school. So this was a project we did on smart bombs. That's the actual size of a smart bomb, right? And we built one with dollar bills and French francs and sterling in proportion to the spending on arms in the world. And then we took this bomb out onto the street and we used it, and we had, these are the Millennium Development Goal symbols in proportion to the amount of resources spent on smart bombs that would be needed to achieve that particular Millennium Development Goal. You could barely see it, right? We took it out in the street, and I'm going to show you later on, if time allows. We've just finished doing a project on migration in the Mediterranean, our current crisis. And of course we present what's happening in the Mediterranean as a crisis of numbers, a crisis of them, a crisis of us, a crisis of what's happening, they're undermining, etc., etc. It is a crisis. It's a crisis of what does it mean to be a European. It's a crisis of European values. It's a crisis of creativity, a crisis of heart, and a crisis of management. 1 million people, 300 million of us, and we can't manage it? Worst case scenario in the next 3 to 5 years, possibly 5 million people, and we can't manage it? And our reaction is racist, our reaction is panic, our reaction is atavistic. Blame them. It's bizarre in terms of what Europe is supposed to be about and what our whole history is. So I'm going to come back to look at some of these questions. I want to illustrate the importance of education from my own life. Mr. Long taught me Shakespeare in school. I was 14 and we done Hamlet, okay? And he told us a secret. Hamlet, you don't read Shakespeare, you speak it. So we had to get up and speak it. I can do it. Fine, it is an unweeded garden that grows to seed things rank and the gross in nature possess it merely while she like me obey, followed my father's coffin. Fine it, right? The whole idea of that was to get some sense of emotion, to get some sense of emotional intelligence, to get some sense of putting yourself in other people's shoes. And it has stayed with me in terms of just something that was in the back of my head, that when I hear Shakespeare now, I have a whole other set of knock-on ideas and values and reactions. The second one is a guy called Stuart Daltrey. Stuart taught me biogeography. And I knew about trees, and I knew about worms, and I knew about soil erosion, and I knew about... But what Stuart taught us was, join up the dots. The environment is where you live. And if Stuart taught me one thing, he taught me the environment is not out there. The environment is in here. Now, if that's not a fundamental piece of learning, and that was probably done over a class or two. Didn't take all of my education to come across that. But you know what I mean? Learning is done in a flash. And they're just two small examples from my own schooling of teachers who had a fundamental impact on me. Another one was, I was introduced to the Bushmen of the Kalahari in primary school in such a way that that whole notion of older cultures, older traditions, and I've been kind of interested. We have a very effective link with Aboriginal Australia, the world's longest effective continuous culture, Australia's first people. And we have developed a lot of programs with them, and I attribute some of that to that kind of prodding, that kind of opening up that was given to me by two teachers, Mr. Long, who wasn't very popular, and Stu, who was very popular. Now, of course, we had a lot of the other stuff as well, and I won't go into that. But certainly, despite all the bad stuff, all the unlearning that I had to do later, we still had these little gems that, you know, you could hold on to. So I suppose one of the things we could do is to just invite you to reflect on a teacher who influenced you. Possibly negatively, or preferably positively. My daughter Ciara tells a great story about Michael Denny, the principal of Loretto Bray, where she went to school. She was in the corridor one day and he passed her by and he said, "Ms. Regan, your tie is crooked." And she walked off and he went, "Ciara, your tie." What did she take out of that? He knows me. He knew my name. She has nothing but amazing respect for that man on the basis that he, in a school of nearly 600 young women, knew her by name, knew her first name, and called her by her first name. Now you'll read that in loads and loads of places. The chair of our organisation that I used to be coordinator for, Jerry Duffy, he's principal of Pres Bray, 800 hooligans, all male, between 12 and 17. He goes in there and he goes, "Oh, the smell of it, I just love it." He knows all of those guys by name. We go to the pub, and a fella comes in, 7 foot tall. "Hello, sir." You know, the respect that teachers can earn and can have if we do our job well goes right on and on and on and on. Lovely story. We were in a restaurant, couldn't get a taxi. Jerry picks up the phone. "I'll sort it. Roger, where are you?" "Right, 20 minutes outside." We go outside and I said to Jerry, he says, "Wait, we get a lift home in 20 minutes." The Domino's pizza van turns up. We get a lift home in the Domino's pizza van. That's the power of teachers, right? Now I'm going to do a little bit of advertising here because I'm not going to be able to get through everything. A lot of the stuff that to me is at the core of citizenship, global citizenship, development, education, etc. we've tried to cover in this book, this reader. We're now heading for our 7th edition and we've sold 250,000 copies over a 20-year period. So there's a huge interest in this area. And we don't give it away. You have to pay for it. But what's interesting is that people are very happy. There's a massive amount of interest in the area. So we're not pushing rocks uphill. There's a lot of interest, a lot of enthusiasm. Martin Turner, a friend of mine, the cartoonist, reflecting on climate change and reflecting on the Pope's latest encyclical on climate. And let us pray, indeed. Yeah, exactly. Now, can I? Oh, okay. I'm just going to very quickly refer to 805 million people estimated to be still chronically undernourished. 1 in 9 globally, 1 in 4 in Africa. Absolutely unacceptable. Have the resources, have the capacity, have the knowledge, have the access, have the people, have the platforms, know what we're doing, still can't do it. According to the UN, developed countries throw away 30 to 40% of all food purchased. Domestic household waste is the largest contributor. Don't waste food. There's a report by the Institute of Engineers and by the UNFAO in Rome, UN Food and Agriculture Organization, which makes a direct link between food waste and world hunger. So if we want to talk about world hunger, there's hundreds of opportunities and platforms we can have this conversation on, and food waste is one of them. We shouldn't be wasting food anyway, but if you want to deal with world hunger, one of the things we need to do is stop wasting food. The average American consumes 127 kilos of beef per year. The average European, 82. Beef. Reduce your intake of beef by at least 60%, if you're serious. But even just to discuss that whole question with students is amazing, because beef is the least efficient way to produce protein. If you want to take in protein, beef's not the road to go down. We have a huge battle on our hands in Ireland because, of course, we're beef exporters, and the IFA, the Irish Farmers Association, is looking for an exemption from our climate change on the basis that here we are, straight battle, right? Too much beef being consumed, full stop. And the average European, by the way, 82 kilos. And you take all the vegetarians, vegans, and people who only eat pork and white meat, and there's an awful lot of people eating an awful lot of beef. Stop it. Or as the Australians say, get your hand off it, darling. Right? Increasingly globalized, interconnected, wealthier than ever, but also increasingly fragmented, unequal, and at risk. The way we look at the world, the language we use, we're now used to, we're interconnected, we're globalized. But when you look behind that, for lots and lots and lots of the world's people, that is an absolute lie of the most fundamental kind. Trickle down theory, trickle up practice. Let me show you the figures. We did a resource years ago, 550, 500, and this is the updated figures. Every year, if we take last year, okay, these figures are a little bit controversial, but I'll skip over that for the minute. 30 billion in private voluntary aid given. Through NGOs, through philanthropy, etc., etc. 30 billion, a lot of dosh. 135 billion in official aid. So we transfer 165 billion to them out of our munificence. In 2013 figures, 970 billion came back to us from poorer countries in legal behaviour. 970 billion, thanks very much. And in illegal transfers, at least the same again. So the ratio is for every 165 we give, we take back 1,970. And yet the model of presentation of our relationship with them is one of a giving us and a receiving them. It's actually the other way around. A report done on Africa has pointed out that for the last 20 years, Africa has been a net contributor to financial resources given to the rich. That is a fundamental reversal of the popular imagination about the relationship between us and them. And you can see it in the debate in the Mediterranean about migrants. They are coming here to take our stuff, while we're over there taking their stuff on a daily basis. Now, I don't have time to go into how this all operates, but you can begin to think about it. Unfair trade, the brain drain, intellectual property rights, etc., etc., etc. And then under the illegal stuff, we have tax havens, we have tax dodges, we have illegal logging, we have illegal fishing, we have the transfer in human organs. In the next edition of the book, I have a diagram which is breathtaking because we classify the value of all of these illegal activities and the consequences for developing countries. And yet, we still believe in trickle-down theory. They have to wait until we come out of our recession so that we can then get back to helping them once again. So the implications of this for teaching, I think, are quite straightforward. What view of the world are we going to teach? Are we going to teach the lies? Or half the lies? Or some of the truth? And I know that's a big challenge, and I'm not naive about it. I've spent most of my life working on it. But I think there are some of the questions that you have to grapple with. 200 million work hours consumed daily by women collecting water for their families. Play with that. Fantastic. Play with that. Just 62 individuals have the same wealth as 3.6 billion. This is the politics of envy, as I was told recently. Dr. Regan, you're big into the politics of envy. No. If you look at the PowerPoint on inequality, this has massive consequences for all of us. It's not just about envy. I want to be Steve Jobs. I don't want to be Steve Jobs. Or anyone like him. Right? The wealth of the bottom half fell by just over $1 trillion, a drop of 41%. A rise of 44%, a drop of 41%. Some key ideas. The more we come together, the more we grow apart. No country treats its women the same as its men. I think these are educational challenges in terms of the way we approach our work. Enough and is good. We have the right to use the earth and its resources, so long as there's enough for others and not just for us, and we leave it for the people who follow us in as good a condition. Enough and is good. Radical fundamental principle given to us by Locke in his defence of private property. Rights and responsibility cannot be separated, otherwise they make no sense. If we do not believe in full rights for Syrians, then how can we argue for full rights for ourselves? Because rights then are negotiable. They're not fixed. Extreme poverty, greatest luxury. I won't go into that one. So the role of education, for me, is summarised in this slide. To instill our sense of ourselves. Who are we? What are we? What do we stand for? Who am I? Our place in the world. What does it mean to be a Scot? To be a feminist, to be a woman, to be a mother, to be a father in the world today? What is my place in the world, coming out of my sense of myself? And as a result of that, what's my duty? I know that's an old-fashioned word, but what is my duty? I went to college, I got a master's degree, I got a PhD. Now a lot of people think, wow, great, you worked hard for that, now is my time. My view of that is actually, I now owe back to society. If you're a woman and you went to university and you finished university, you're in the top 5% of women in the world. What's your duty out of that? Pretty kind of fundamental question. What is my duty? Finally, somewhere along the line of development we discover who we really are. And then we make our real decision for which we are responsible. Make that decision primarily for yourself, because you can never really live anyone else's life, not even your child's. The influence you exert is through your own life and what you become yourself as a teacher. That's the platform that we collectively share today. The influence we exert is through our own lives and what we become ourselves. And I'm adding in as teachers.